Coming up on Bridge City News, federal conservatives speak out on the news that Finance Minister Bill Morneau has resigned. Farming Smarters come out with tips to help farmers battle disease with their crops. And we hear from foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari, who talks about recent poll numbers involving Trump and Biden and just how close the November election will be in the United States.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Bill Morneau has resigned as Federal Minister of Finance and as a Liberal MP. There's been pressure for Morneau to step down because of his involvement in the We Charity scandal. He says he is putting his name forward as a candidate to be the next Secretary General for the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development.
It's never been my plan to run for more than 2 federal election cycles. As we move to the next phase of our fight against the pandemic and pave the road towards economic recovery, we must recognize that this process will take many years. It's the right time for a new finance minister to deliver on that plan for the long and challenging road ahead. That's why I'll be stepping down as finance minister and as member of parliament for Toronto Centre. No matter what, I know that with this Liberal government, Canadians will be in good hands.
The Trudeau Liberals have confirmed that Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland will be taking over as Federal Finance Minister in a minor cabinet shuffle. Trudeau also announced that he's proroguing Parliament until the end of September. Candice Bergen is the House Leader for the Conservative Party of Canada. She's also a Manitoba MP, and she joins me now via Zoom. Now, Candice, what do you think of Morneau's resignation and the appointment of Chrystia Freeland as the new Finance Minister?
I don't think changing finance ministers is going to make a difference in the corruption that's plaguing this government.
With all of the ethics violations involving Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, should he be the next to resign?
His very first ethics scandal, we I guess gave him a break and thought he was new and learning. He then interfered in the SNC-Lavalin case and was convicted of breaking ethics codes at that point. And you may recall we thought he wasn't fit to govern at that point. Now, he was reelected, but with a very much reduced mandate. He has a minority parliament. And yeah, we don't have confidence in him. And he has shown time and time again that he really has problems keeping the rules and believing that the rules apply to him. He thinks they don't. So I don't think changing the finance minister is going to make any big difference. And frankly, Hal, I got to say, this nonsense that somehow he and Bill Morneau are on different pages when it comes to fiscal policy is a joke. I mean, they've been working hand in glove for the last 6 years, racking up deficits, spending money, increasing taxes. So they are on the same page, and I think that was a real smokescreen.
That was Manitoba Conservative MP Candice Bergen. Lethbridge MP Rachel Harder spoke about Morneau's resignation. She says she's not surprised about the resignation in light of the We Charity scandal. Harder says this is not the first time the Liberals and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau have been involved in a controversy.
I think we have to remember that the Prime Minister is being investigated for the 3rd time by the Ethics Commissioner. You know, the first time he was investigated, he accepted, a private island vacation from the Aga Khan, and he took over $200,000 from taxpayers and used it to help fund the trip for his family. You know, the second time he was investigated, he tried to interfere in a criminal prosecution with SNC-Lavalin, a company in Quebec. You know, now he's being called under investigation for a 3rd time, and it's because he chose to give almost $1 billion to an organization that pays his mom for speaking, his brother for speaking, his wife is highly involved, Morneau's children are involved, and so it's just classic liberal entitlement.
Rachel Harder's usual Whoop Up Days pancake breakfast has been renamed to Cooped Up Days. The Lethbridge MP switched up her usual pancake breakfast to a drive-through version at Exhibition Park. As BCN's Ainsley O'Reilly explains, hundreds of people were excited to take part.
MP Rachel Harder knows that kicking off Whoop Up Days with her annual pancake breakfast is going to be different during the COVID-19 pandemic.
I understand that, all of the restrictions that have been put on us because of COVID, they're not fun. They're not. But there is still opportunity to get out there and to really enjoy the community.
Volunteers had to adapt as well, serving up buttermilk goodness and local meats with a positive attitude.
COVID is not going to get us down. We are going to protect ourselves and others, but at the same time, we're going to still have fun and we're going to get out. Respected social distancing. Obviously, we always all have our masks and our gloves, but it has been challenging but exciting at the same time.
Harder had over 800 people register, with so much community support that she had to turn people away.
Community wants to be out and about, they want to be involved, they're looking for fun activities to do, and so I was happy that I could at least provide that.
People want to get out, people want to celebrate, and this is one way. We can't celebrate Whoop Up Days as we normally do, but we can still have a breakfast.
Whoop Up Days will continue this week with a National Potato Day drive-through tomorrow and Food Truck Festival Friday and Saturday. For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
2 houses were completely destroyed and a third one suffered significant damage following an explosion on Fairmont Boulevard South in Lethbridge on Tuesday afternoon. When EMS arrived on scene, they saw the houses were completely engulfed in flames. A neighbor said he was scared for the family's safety.
I just was watching the hockey game and I was going to make a coffee and I heard this big boom and I looked out the window and the garage and the Suburban were on fire. I just about fell off my knees and I opened my window and I saw my fire. I was scared because I knew they had 4 kids and a family.
The family, which included 4 children and a dog, managed to make it out safely. There have been no reported injuries or deaths from the fires. An investigation of what caused the blazes continues. Farming Smarter has come out with new information to help farmers during this crop season. As Micah Quinn explains now, the multi-crop matrix will offer tips for farmers on how to look for diseases and to judge the state of their crops.
Farming Smarter has provided tips to farmers about how to look for disease in their crops, and they are doing this in their own multi-crop matrix.
So we've got 9 different crops that we've grown in a matrix of 49 different combinations. So, you know, how does... And then on the 3rd year, we're using durum. Durum's the most susceptible of all cereals to Fusarium head blight. So it's kind of our canary in the coal mine type thing. So after doing all of these different rotations, we're going to look at the durum and evaluate the head blight incidence and severity, as well as analyze the seed for mycotoxin. And that mycotoxin is produced by the fungus. That's what really spoils the wheat.
Cole says there's a big importance of crop rotation to weed and disease control.
So while the point was in this study to look at diseases, we're noticing that weed management is definitely a factor. And that's a nice thing is you'll never see this on a farmer's field, right? So he'll have, or she will have a quarter section of this one year, the quarter section of the next this year. We actually have everything together in a small area. So
for Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Astrophysicists from the University of Lethbridge will now be able to expand their research in a big way. The Canadian Foundation for Innovation has awarded the school with a $250,000 grant. In the simplest terms, Professor David Naylor says it'll be a giant fridge that will assist in space exploration.
The reason that you do that is to attain the greatest sensitivity with detectors that we use to explore the universe. So you have to cool your instrumentation to make it really sensitive so you can look far back in time when you launch instruments on spacecraft. So it gets to minus 250 Celsius on the moon at night because the night is so long. And so to survive the moon, any instrumentation that has to survive the moon has to be tested in a really deep freezer. So it's a very sophisticated fridge.
Naylor says the project will most likely be built and ready to go sometime next year. Nothing sums up the summer of 2020 quite like being cooped up indoors. Now in our next story, video journalist Naveen Day discovers a unique way for children and their parents to play outdoors.
In a time where physical distancing is the new norm, one organization is going back to something many of us miss: social interaction. This is the Lethbridge Sports Council's Roving Gym.
The program is intended to provide an environment for families to connect while nurturing physical literacy.
Physical literacy is always important. It's precursors for sport, movement, and how people grow into healthy, happy adults. what we're seeing is that physical literacy has a huge play in cognitive skills. So once you learn to move, you learn to problem solve, and it helps people as they become adults.
It's really good bringing my son out here with COVID going on right now, and all the activities that they offer. They're offering like a safe place for kids to still do the activities, but in an environment where he can still be with kids his age.
Executive Director of the Lethbridge Sport Council, Susan Iman, says the program is provided free of charge thanks to grants given by the Alberta Recreation and Parks Association and the Community Foundation of Lethbridge and Southern Alberta.
We absolutely want it to be accessible to everyone. There is no cost. We want people, if they're grandparents, foster parents, parents, step-parents, we have some daycares who come out as well. We want everyone to be able to, along with the children, gain a love for movement.
The roving gym program was initially offered as an indoor program held during the winter months. However, this year, an outdoor summer version of the program was introduced. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
A new drug treatment court will be opening up in Medicine Hat. The province announced today that the Hat will have one of 5 drug treatment courts outside of Calgary and Edmonton as part of a 4-year, $20 million investment expanding the program across the province. Government officials say they're also providing Alberta Law Enforcement Response Teams, or ALERT, with an additional $50 million for initiatives to dismantle organized crime in our province. Drug treatment courts gives people who commit nonviolent offenses access to judicially supervised treatment and recovery. The province also announced today that the cost for the Fair Deal panel came in at 43% under budget. Government officials say even with the COVID-19 challenges, total costs associated with the panel's work came to less than $375,000. The Fair Deal panel featured 4 months of public town hall meetings asking Albertans how Alberta could have a stronger voice within Canada. The panel submitted its final report to the government in May, which included 25 recommendations. The province's all 25 are being analyzed right now. The province announced that there were 89 new cases of COVID-19 over the past 24 hours in Alberta. That brings the total number to 1,169 active cases. There are 39 active cases here in the South Zone. Our province's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dina Hinshaw, says new cases were discovered in Deadwood, north of Grand Prairie, and at a church in Edmonton.
Despite precautions being taken during in-person services, there are now 15 confirmed cases linked to the Bible Pentecostal Church in Edmonton. The church has about 150 members. Anyone who attended the church between July 26th and August 12th, or who was a close contact of someone who attended, likewise should book a COVID-19 test online and continue to monitor for symptoms. It is a stark reminder that coming together in large gatherings risks sharing more than fellowship. It risks sharing the COVID-19 virus.
The province has so far just over 11,000 Albertans have now recovered from the novel coronavirus. Many provinces will be welcoming back kids to school this fall. Now, many parents are concerned about allowing their children to return to school during the pandemic, even with precautions being taken. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe defended his government's reopening plan. He says extra funding is going to school divisions to help them prepare for classes which have been pushed back to after Labor Day.
I want to ensure that we are providing more resources, more information, more time, and more testing capacity to ensure a safe return to school this fall. As you know, the province has provided the overall guidelines and school divisions have released their operational plans to ensure a safe return to school. The province will allocate $40 million from the COVID Contingency Fund for additional costs related to ensuring the safety of our students and staff throughout this pandemic in the classroom.
New Brunswick Premier Blaine Higgs has called for a September 14th election. The Tory Premier threatened last week to trigger a vote unless opposition parties agree to keep his minority government in power until 2022 or until the pandemic was declared over.
Over the next 28 days, New Brunswickers will decide who will govern New Brunswick. We are in a pandemic, and the coming election campaign will not be like any election we have ever experienced.
U.S. President Donald Trump traveled to the battleground state of Wisconsin. He was looking to seize a bit of the spotlight from the Democratic National Convention, which is now underway.
We can't play games, get out and vote, do those beautiful absentee ballots, or just make sure your vote gets counted. Make sure because the only way we're going to lose this election is if the election is rigged. Remember that. It's the only way we're going to lose this election. So we have to be very careful. Look, this is more than this election. That's a big statement. The only way they're going to win is that way, and we can't let that happen.
Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, says when it comes to the polls, it's too close to call between U.S. President Donald Trump and presumptive Democratic candidate Joe Biden.
Extremely close, with Biden having the advantage of a few points. Now, we have not gone to debating yet. We have not gone to really scrutinizing Biden and Harris. President Trump is really just fending for himself day in and day out. It looks like his achievements are buried, while the problems that we're having here in the country are emphasized and blamed on the president.
Catch the full interview with Lisa Daftari talking U.S. politics and why the Americans are sending more troops to Poland. That is coming up after Business News. A new TV pilot focusing on Alberta's energy sector is being filmed right now. The show is called Pipe Nation and focuses on a debt-ridden single mom working in the oil patch in the fictional town of Hardwell.
It's about the people, the grit, the hard work, the colorful nature of the individuals, and they're just beautiful people, and to showcase that beyond the Dow Jones, beyond just oil and gas numbers, of the human struggle, the condition in overcoming adversity, and the determination of these characters is what the show is about, and creating an emotional connection with an industry rather than just an industry that the world misunderstands.
What I really love about the script is that it's a single mom that, even though I'm not a single mom, but I know that there's a lot of single moms out there that are doing exactly what we're representing here, the struggle and the sacrifice that they have to make for their family, to feed their families. And even though it's hard and it shows a lot of hardship, it's just, showing that women also want to have that equal right and be seen as an equal out there.
Lots of sunshine and hot temperatures for southern Alberta once again. Will we see a reprieve? Complete weather details are coming up. The heat warning continues from Environment Canada for our region. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a complete look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, are we getting close to reaching some of those record high temperatures for Lethbridge?
Yes, and we nearly hit one yesterday with 35.6 degrees as our high. The record was 36 degrees, and that was back in 2001. So yes, we're certainly close to those record highs. 15 degrees is our overnight low this evening. We could see a westerly wind gusting to 50 kilometers per hour at times. Into tomorrow, partly cloudy skies, high 33 degrees. We are still in that heat warning, as you had mentioned, for southern Alberta and actually most of Alberta. Overnight low tomorrow evening, 14 degrees. Should be a lovely couple of days if you enjoy the heat. And then coming up on Friday, 33 degrees is our high. So we're still in the 30s there. Lots of sunshine. That's for Thursday. Friday's high, 29 degrees, 28 for Saturday under sunny skies. A mix of sun and cloud for both Sunday and Monday with 27 the high for both of those days. So we are certainly higher than the average high for this time of year, which is right here. 26 degrees is the average high. Average low, 10 degrees. 35 was our high on this day back in 2001. Our low temperature was 3 degrees. That was in 1995. Sun rose this morning at 6:27 a.m. and our sunset tonight, 8:43 p.m. So let's take a look at what's happening across the country for our highs. For tomorrow, starting on the west coast, mix of sun and cloud for both Victoria and Vancouver. Tomorrow, 23 the high over in Victoria. Vancouver's high, 24. 30 degrees in Calgary. 26 in Edmonton. Edmonton should be a lovely sunny day. Calgary, however, could see some showers, possibility of some thunderstorms as well. Lots of sunshine across the rest of the prairies as well here. Saskatoon and Regina both under a heat warning as well. 32 degrees the high in Saskatoon, 34 for Regina, 33 the high in Winnipeg under mainly sunny skies. Also clear skies expected tomorrow in Toronto here, 24 the high, 23 the high for Ottawa with a mix of sun and cloud. Possibility of some showers tomorrow in Montreal with a high of 22. And as we look into Atlantic Canada, here we go. We're seeing a much better weather. We had a lot of rain earlier today, but that's going to clear up for tomorrow here in Fredericton. Mix of sun and cloud, 23 the high, 25 in Charlottetown with mainly clear skies there, lots of sunshine. Halifax high tomorrow, 26 degrees. Now St. John's, Newfoundland could see some drizzle throughout the day tomorrow, especially in the morning. 24 is their high. They could see some wind gusts up to 60 km tomorrow as well. So there you go. That is your weather.
Canada is getting its first female finance minister. Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland was sworn in today following the resignation of Bill Morneau. Freeland will have a tough task in managing our country through the COVID-19 recovery. The federal deficit has soared to a projected $343 billion due to programs to cushion the impact of the pandemic. More than 40% of the 3 million workers who lost their jobs were still unemployed as of mid-July. The Canada Revenue Agency recently announced that they were the victims of 2 cyber attacks where about 5,600 personal accounts were compromised. The hackers used passwords and usernames collected from data breaches they'd acquired to access the CRA accounts. Shauna K. Thomas with the Better Business Bureau in Calgary says they have tips for users to protect themselves from these kinds of scams.
You make your passwords long and strong. You try to mix them up as well. So you can use a phrase from a song, a news headline that just sticks with you, and you put some numbers in there, some special characters in there. So it's much harder for people to break those codes. Don't use your name, your date of birth, the street that you live in, the high school you went to. Those are bad passwords. So if you do have passwords similar to those, or just very simple passwords, the name of your pet, you may want to go in and make some changes to these passwords.
The Better Business Bureau says that the worst thing you can do in a situation like this is not to believe that you'd be the victim of an attack, as scammers do not discriminate who they target. Canadian miner Ivanhoe Mine says a worker was killed Sunday at a copper project in the Congo. Company officials say the death occurred underground while a contractor's employee was moving a drilling rig. It says the senior management team is working with government authorities on an investigation into the accident. The project is a joint venture in which Ivanhoe Mines and Zijin Mining Group each hold a 39.6% stake. The DRC government owns a 20% stake. Walmart delivered strong profits and sales that beat Wall Street expectations for its second quarter. The retailer was helped by shoppers focused on buying food and other items as they stayed close to home during the pandemic. Online sales south of the border jumped 97%, and sales at stores open at least a year increased just over 9%. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 30 points on the day to 16,626. The Dow was down 66 points to 27,778. The S&P 500 was down 7 points to 3389. The Nasdaq was up 81 points to 11,210. Oil was unchanged at $42.89 per barrel. Natural gas was up 7 cents to $2.41. Gold was up a nickel to $2,002.49 an ounce, and silver was unchanged at $27.67 an ounce. Wheat is at $213 per metric ton, barley's at $206, canola's at $4.88, and corn is at $230 per metric ton. Live cattle were unchanged today at $109.88, feeder cattle were up $1.20 to $145.60, and lean hogs were down $2.10 to $51.43. The Canadian dollar was up slightly on the day to $75.95 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Justin Trudeau has named Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland as our new finance minister. The swearing-in ceremony took place earlier today. Freeland takes over from Bill Morneau, who stepped down in the wake of the We Charity scandal. Morneau says he will now put his name forward to become the next Secretary General of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. By the way, Trudeau also announced today that he's proroguing Parliament till the end of September. Joe Biden has chosen his running mate. Her name is Kamala Harris. Now, what do we know about Ms. Harris outside of the fact that she went to high school in Montreal? One of our regular contributors, Lisa Daftari, will explain if Harris is a good or bad choice for the Democrats in the U.S. That interview is coming up. But first, here's a look at what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. Get to know your city and take part in the Lethbridge Scavenger Hunt. Download the Let's Roam Scavenger Hunt app, lace up your walking shoes, and head out with family to discover the best landmarks in Lethbridge. Put your navigation skills to the test while enjoying the journey at your own pace. No reservations, no tour guides, and fun for all ages. Visit letsroam.com/scavenger hunt. Tourism Lethbridge is hosting Food Truck Fridays every week. featuring local food trucks with delicious lunches, exotic drinks, and ice cream treats. Different food trucks come each Friday to 2805 Scenic Drive South, open from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. For details, visit tourismlethbridge.com. There's something new for anime fans. Nikayuko Japanese Garden is hosting an Anime Saturday on August 22nd from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Watch videos on anime creation in the pavilion and learn fun trivia about your favorite anime characters. For more information, visit nikayuko.com/events. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
The U.S. election is coming up this November. It's the incumbent Donald Trump and the Republicans going up against presumptive Democratic nominee Joe Biden. Now, Mr. Biden has a new running mate in Kamala Harris. To talk more about this in more detail is American journalist Lisa Daftari joining me once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, what do we know about Harris outside of the fact that she spent some time going to Westmont High School in Montreal 4 decades ago?
Yeah, it seems like she's got a little bit of something for everyone, right? She presents herself as an Indian American, as an African American. She will present herself as a moderate, as a very, very left of left liberal. Her voting record speaks for itself. She has voted more liberally than Bernie Sanders, according to statistics. And she is no moderate. She is no moderate. She has very, very strong feelings on late-term abortion. She has strong feelings on climate change. She thinks those who deny it should be held accountable. And the list goes on. So, you know, they're trying to Trojan horse her into the American psyche. A lot of people compare her to Barack Obama in terms of being relatable, in terms of being that, you know, kind of a grassroots liberal who came up on her own and you know, became the person that she is. I think she can be compared to Barack Obama in the sense that she will try to appease any group that she's in front of. She will try to use her record in however way that she sees will benefit her. And the bottom line, Hal, is that here in the United States, we have such a divide between left and right. So the media will worship her. They will whitewash her. And I'm sure they've already whitewashed her all across Google, so you can't really find too many incriminating things. But just remember, she stood up against Joe Biden when he was accused of harassment, and you know, she believed the accusers. So now she'll have to really answer to that if she is questioned about it.
That's the surprising part, the fact that she was so anti-Biden for the longest time, and all of a sudden they're the best of friends. How much do you think this will give the Democrats more credibility, having Kamala Harris as the running mate for Biden?
Look, you know, you can look at it in one of two ways. Joe Biden said, I will choose a woman of color as my running mate. And a lot of people saw that as, wow, he's so progressive. He's going to choose a woman of color. But remember when Mitt Romney said, I have a binder full of women to choose from, meaning I have a list of women. And what are their qualifications? Are you just choosing her because she's a woman of color? Look, if anyone said that about me, I would be very, very upset. I would hope that my achievements would come before my skin color, my race, my religion, my political background, and my gender. So, you know, I think that it depends on what lenses you have on in the United States. It really is not about facts anymore. Everything is politicized, and it's some rough times here.
Now, what did the recent polls show, Lisa? How close is the race between Trump and Biden right now?
Extremely close, with Biden having the advantage of a few points. Now, we have not gone to debating yet. We have not gone to really scrutinizing Biden and Harris. President Trump is really just fending for himself day in and day out. It looks like his achievements are buried, while the problems that we're having here in the country are emphasized and blamed on the president rather than blamed on science or on, you know, China or on tariffs or on whatever it may be. But, you know, they're doing a great job with the stimulus checks. They're doing a great job with, you know, doing what they can given the circumstances.
Let me ask you something. Will we actually see a debate between Biden and Trump? And the reason I ask that, some political pundits I've spoken with are concerned that there might be some dementia creeping in with Joe Biden.
Right. So this, I've always called this a Trump election. It's going to be people who want Trump and people who don't want Trump voting. Joe Biden's name is going to remain out of people's psyche, and the Democrats will want his name to stay out of the race for as long as possible because they want to win on the fact that he's not Donald Trump. He could be Mickey Mouse. He is going to use that to his advantage. And because of all the gaffes and because of the mistakes and because of the inability to have that recall that, that is necessary when you're running for political office, they're going to try to keep him out of the spotlight for as long as possible. On the flip side, they will want Kamala Harris on stage. They will want her to use her savvy and her quick-witted responses. She did pretty well in the debates. She didn't make it because her record, I think, was a challenge to her. But I think they will have this kind of flip-flopping between Biden and Harris, because on the one hand, they will want to highlight Harris, but they will want to hide Joe Biden.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says the U.S. and Poland signed a deal whereby more American troops will be sent to Poland. Lisa, some 4,500 troops are already there, with another 1,000 on the way. The question is, why?
Right. So this is almost a kind of balancing of our assets in the region. As we move away from countries like Germany and Turkey, we will be focusing on countries that share our interests. We're living in a post-ally geopolitical world where our friends are those who share our interests, who share the responsibility of having a free Western Hemisphere and Eastern Hemisphere for that matter. So Donald Trump has done a great job, and his cabinet as well. Mike Pompeo is a wonderful Secretary of State, of really focusing in on who shares our interests, who are our friends, and we're gonna cozy up to them. They did the same thing by striking a deal between the UAE and Israel on Thursday. This was a wonderful deal that focused in on moderate, progressive countries that want to share in a global economy. They want to have free trade, and they want to keep their borders safe. So it's a win-win for all, and we're going to be parking some of our troops in Poland.
Belarus protesters gathered for the biggest ever opposition rally, Lisa, tens of thousands of them, demanding fair elections and wanting to stop the violence there.
Yeah, this is in the aftermath of what protesters are deeming as a fraudulent election, a power grab by the dictator there. He's been in power for decades, and they are trying to get rid of him. It's as simple as that. We're seeing this a lot around the world, where there's either a talk of an election, an upcoming election like here in the United States, or a past election where protesters are willing, ready, able, and they know that this is a last chance, or I should say a significant chance to make a difference, come out onto the streets, let their voices be heard. And in the case of Belarus, this is historic. We've never seen people come out like this. We haven't seen these numbers on the streets, and they mean business.
Russian President Vladimir Putin, meanwhile, Lisa, says he's offering military support to Belarus's embattled President Alexander Lukashenko.
Yeah, always there to lend a hand to a dictator. Putin's good for that, at least. Whether it's Bashar al-Assad or here in Belarus, he's made it known that he wants this guy in power, and he's willing to help him. And the leader in Belarus said, you know what, we're having an SOS moment here, so why don't you come and help us? The two have signaled to one another that they need help, and Putin has already offered to come in and stabilize.
The United Nations Security Council recently defeated a U.S. resolution to indefinitely extend the UN arms embargo on Iran. Now, the Trump administration only received support from the Dominican Republic.
Yeah, isn't that awful? Think about this. We're looking to isolate the Iranian regime for their weapons program. So that means any punitive measures are meant to curb a nuclear program. And here you have the UN, this waste of perfectly great real estate in New York City that does nothing but reward countries like Iran and Saudi Arabia by putting them on human rights watches and women's committees, and then marginalizes countries like the U.S., like Israel, and writes them up for different types of human rights abuses and so on and so forth. So here we have a resolution that's put forth by the U.S. to extend the arms embargo. We have heard Arab nations, we have heard European nations support the U.S. on this verbally, only because they know that the Iranian regime is lying through their teeth about their weapons program. And it is a global effort to curb the Iranian regime and where they put their money into nefarious activities, whether it's their weapons program or into places like Iraq and Yemen and Syria, and killing innocent people through bombings and exporting terrorism of different sorts. But anyway, this measure was meant to curb that behavior, and the UN said, not today.
Arson balloons sparked dozens of fires near Gaza, and hundreds of people are rioting along the Gaza Strip, burning tires and setting off explosives. Lisa, the unrest continues.
Right. There's no sign of peace between the Palestinians and Israel. And up to last week, we thought, well, if there can't be peace between the Palestinians and Israel, there will never be peace in the Middle East, until we saw some glimmers of hope when Donald Trump announced that through a phone call, he was able to bring together Bibi Netanyahu and the leader of the UAE for a very historic peace deal that will normalize relations between the two nations. This becomes the third peace deal between Arab nations and Israel. And the reason I mention this is because it's business as usual between the Palestinians and Israel, with these fire balloons and other things being sent over. But at the same time, the region moves on. The region needs to progress, to mature. The Arab nations want the economic opportunity that they see in Israel. They want a vaccine to coronavirus if Israel should be the one to have it. They want water irrigation technology, and they're not going to allow the Palestinians or the Iranian regime to keep them back. So although this is bad news that we're continuing to see this awful foul play on the Gaza Strip, other things are happening in the region that give us some hope.
Now, a leading businessman from the United Arab Emirates said he was in talks with an Israeli airline about establishing direct flights between Israel and the UAE, hailing the recently announced normalization deal between the two countries as great opportunities for both nations.
Oh, it will be a wonderful opportunity. What a natural relationship that the two can have, both in terms of commerce, in terms of technology, in terms of development, and of course, tourism. People from both nations love to travel, love to tour the region, and they will have that reciprocity now. And it's only wonderful news, and I hope that more Arab nations will follow suit, and I'm sure that they will. This was kind of the icebreaker in warming tensions between Israel and its Arab neighbors. And I know that other countries will want that economic prosperity, they will want the opportunity, and they will sign on as well.
But let me ask you something. If things go south in a hurry, could we potentially see one of those planes being shot down?
Sure. Look, the Iranian regime has already stated that they are now consider the UAE a place where they need to focus the resistance as well. We just did a piece on this at the Foreign Desk today. About how the Iranian regime has reacted very poorly to this. They are very, very threatened by the fact that an Arab nation will team up with Israel. Look, the entire point of the Middle East is to curb Israel because of its brain power, because of its technology power, because of the ability that it has without the oil income, without that revenue to prosper and to grow. And now they've teamed up with an Arab nation that is very rich and able to bring Israel into the Arab world in terms of technology and commerce. That is a huge threat to Iran, and we've seen the Iranians bring down liners before. Why not this time again? So I'm sure that both Israel, the UAE, they will be on very high security alert, particularly if these flights should take to the air.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happens here, definitely. Lisa, at least 5 people were killed following a car bomb exploding at a hotel in Somalia, and at least 28 others were also hurt.
Right. You know, it's another day in the African continent where we're seeing this growth in insurgencies, and it's always when you least expect it at this elite hotel on the water, on the shoreline, people enjoying themselves on holiday, summertime, and of course, very, very tragic, with people dying and people getting very badly hurt. You know, I'm sure that we will hear that either ISIS or one of the other insurgencies will take claim for this, and it will be just another notch on their belt. But, you know, all eyes on Africa. I think that's a country that's up for grabs right now, whether it's Russian influence or Chinese influence or terrorist influence. It is up for grabs, and we're seeing these influences grow daily.
Now, closer to home where you're located, at least in Southern California, let's talk about the heat wave you're experiencing right now, mid to upper 90s, and more of the wildfires. How bad is the situation right now in Southern California?
Right, and you're driving on the freeway. The other day I saw some of the fires in the distance, but nothing too bad just yet. You know, in the past few years we've had, you know, uncontrollable fires where people have lost their homes. I mean, neighborhoods destroyed, acres and acres. So we're hoping that this doesn't happen this time around. And as you know, right now we are still under our second quarantine. Basically, we reopened and we shut down again here in Southern California. So more people are working from home, more people are at risk, more people are you know, in their homes, and we have to be more vigilant than ever to keep these down.
Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari joining us once again from Los Angeles. Thanks so much, Lisa.
My pleasure.
The human body is an absolutely amazing piece of work. It's so incredibly complex, with each body part serving a specific purpose. Joining me now to talk about this further is Philip Yancey, a best-selling author, and the book we're focusing on today is Fearfully and Wonderfully: The Marvel of Bearing God's Image, available at philipyancey.com. Philip, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you, Hal.
Now tell me a little bit more about your book. Is this a revised version of your writings with the late Dr. Paul Brand?
In a way it is. We actually wrote those books originally about 35 years ago, and a lot has changed in those years. Science has changed. DNA had just recently been discovered when we were writing those books. Medicine has changed. Readers have changed. And so I didn't want Dr. Brand's legacy to be lost, and I took the material we had to work with and reshaped it, kept the most interesting stories, tried to bring it out in a different way for a new generation, just to keep this heroic man's legacy alive.
Now, you know, the title of the book itself is quite thought-provoking. We're actually God's image bearers.
We are. And when I think about that, you know, what is an image? An image is something that reminds you of something else. So we have a phrase, for example, I don't know if you have this in Canada, you can look at a baby and say, oh, he's a spitting image of his father.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you've heard that. Okay, I don't know why they call it spitting, but anyway, what they mean by that is when you look at this baby, it reminds you of his father. And I think that's what we as Christians, as followers of Jesus, are supposed to do. We're God's image bearers, so that when people look at us, look at our behavior, look at how we respond, they'll say, oh, that's different. I wonder why they're acting in that way. Well, they're image bearers of God, because God is like that. So that God causes the rain to fall and the sun to shine on good people and bad people alike. Jesus said, love your enemies. It's counterintuitive, but that's the way God is. So you should use your life to show people what God is like.
Now, Philip, the Bible speaks of the human body quite often, sometimes as an analogy with the church, the body of Christ. Can you share a bit more about this?
Yes, Paul uses that phrase, body of Christ, about 24 times. And it's a pretty beautiful metaphor. Jesus had a body. Christ's body was here on earth for roughly 33 years. But then he left. And he said, people aren't going to have me to look at anymore to decide what God is like. So it's up to you. You are to be my body, your hands, your feet, so that when there's sadness going on, when there's a disaster, catastrophe going on, I want you to be my representative, my hands and feet, the body of Christ in this world.
Now, you talk a bit about homeostasis and how it works in the human body. What can we really learn from this in keeping church unity flowing?
It's a beautiful phrase, and you can see it. Well, I live at altitude. I live in the Rocky Mountains. And when people visit me and they carry their suitcases up the stairs, you can see them breathing hard and panting. And all day long, every time we change activity, our body adjusts. It increases the heart rate, it increases the breathing rate, it increases perspiration. It's got this lovely program going on inside us, subconscious. We're not consciously controlling that. Your body just does it automatically. And it's all to keep the entire body working smoothly as a well-oiled machine. Every little part works together as directed by the head. And that's an analogy of what we should be doing as Christ's body. We take our directions from the head, but we all have different parts, different roles to play. And if we do that, if the body functions as a whole, then we indeed are bearing the image of God.
Any thoughts on how these principles you just mentioned need to come into play when we look at the current global situation with deadly viruses and how we're responding to them?
Oh boy, I could talk for a long time about that. We're all kind of stunned in a state of, it's easy to get fearful, it's easy to get anxious. And that is actually a time when the church, the body of Christ, can exercise the calmness, the peace that we have, because we have resources, we have spiritual resources and faith that will see us through times like that. The doctor I co-wrote these books with, Dr. Paul Brand, used to say that a healthy body is not a body that doesn't feel pain. He worked with leprosy patients who don't feel pain, and they destroyed their own bodies because they lacked that protective instinct. He says a healthy body is a body that feels the pain of the weakest part. And that's what we should be doing as a church. Here I am in America. You know, we've got these inconveniences. We can't go out to restaurants. We can't go to concerts. There are a lot of things we can't do. I got a letter the other day from my translator in Iran describing their scene where they have well over 1,000 people, several thousand people dead. They can't trust the government. Everybody's going around in masks because of sanctions. They're out of basic medical supplies. And it was convicting to me to realize, I think I've got problems. Iran really has problems. And we in the church should always reach out to those weakest parts where pain is most occurring and bring the kind of comfort and hope that we have.
Now, God gave human beings 5 senses in total, including the sense of touch. Why is touch so important?
I don't know if it's still true. When I was originally researching touch years ago, it was the longest entry in the Oxford English Dictionary. It's so important that we use that word more in different ways than any other word in the dictionary. And the people who have leprosy demonstrated to me the importance of touch, because nobody would touch them. In fact, in India, they were called untouchables, and they would go for months without human touch. And then suddenly somebody would reach out with their own skin, with their own hands, and touch them. And Dr. Brand said he'd often see leprosy patients burst into tears because they had never felt that basic human contact. And we're learning in the middle of this coronavirus episode going on, we're learning how important touch is, because we're told we have to keep a 2-meter distance from someone around us. And we're going to feel a touch deprivation before too long, I think. We're going to miss that human touch, that human quality that if you don't touch a baby, we've seen in the orphanages in Romania, places like that, if you do not touch a baby, that baby won't develop. We need human touch just to be fully mature human beings.
You know, it's true. And when a lot of times we get together with people, friends or people we meet for the first time, we want to shake their hand, or family members, we want to give them a big hug. But now it's all about social distancing. So the world has changed somewhat right now. Now, we sometimes wish that God had not given us the sensors to feel pain. But Philip, pain does have a redemptive purpose, does it not?
It certainly has a protective purpose. Dr. Brand was the one who finally proved that virtually all of the damage that we're familiar with in images of leprosy patients comes about because they lack pain. So, easy example, the entire time we've been talking, we blink every few seconds. In fact, you blink about 28,000 times a day. Why do you blink? Because if you don't, your eye dries out. So that blink is a wonderful lubricating mechanism. A leprosy patient loses that little tiny subconscious pain cell that says blink, 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 and he can go all day without blinking. Gradually his eyes will dry out, or he may reach up and scratch his cornea and not even know it. And so what the Brands did, we've got to somehow work around that, because he lacks the protective value of pain. We've got to build in another way to make him blink during the day. And there are pain cells all over our body getting us to shift our weight or change the way we walk, you know, to let us know you need to make an adjustment here. Pain is our friend. It's a language that tells us, pay attention, pay attention. And without pain, you wouldn't go to a doctor. Doctors, the only thing they've got to go on is, where does it hurt? Describe your symptoms to me. So pain it starts out as our friend. It feels like an enemy a lot of times, but it starts as a language the most effective language to get our attention about something very important to our health.
You know, my doctor has a great sense of humor, Philip. I say to him, you know what, it really hurts when I do this with my elbow. He says, well, don't do that with your elbow and it won't hurt. I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Sure, why not? Now, the human eye, let's go back to the human eye. You were just discussing it for a moment here, is absolutely amazing, but it's so complex. We stand in awe, and it really points to the fact that there clearly is a designer who created the human body, and it didn't really happen by accident. What really can we learn from our eyes?
Oh, you could go on forever about eyes. Dr. Paul Brand's wife was an ophthalmologist, and she used to wax eloquent about what she saw. It's actually the one window into the rest of the body. You can see blood cells floating around by looking at, you know, with instruments that a doctor has into the human eye. And cell phone cameras have improved a lot. But every time I go out to the mountains and take a picture, I know I'm not going to come close to reproducing the depth of field, the colors, the variety. The human eye has like 130 million cells lined up, each one triggered to a different light reception. And somehow out of all of that, it assembles what we believe is reality. It's what is around us, what we see. The human eye is probably the most impressive of all the organs that our bodies have that show how fearfully and wonderfully made we are.
Now let's talk a bit about the function of the brain and how it really relates to the church.
The brain is actually kind of isolated and insulated from the rest of the body. It doesn't feel pain. In fact, brain surgeons tell me that once you get through the skull, you can't hurt the brain. If you stick a pin in it, if you stick a match on it, you don't feel pain. There are no pain cells in the brain. There don't need to be, because the brain is isolated, it's protected. So the brain takes that insulated place and somehow listens to everything going on in the rest of the body, all the millions of nerve cells, the senses that we have, and out of that makes determinations of what needs to be done. If I want to move my hand, there are millions of calculations going on to my brain, giving the orders to this muscle group and not that muscle group, and am I moving it near a stove, you know, those kind of things. What amazes me, Hal, is that when Christ became the head of the church, he, in a sense, receded, and he said, okay, it's up to you guys now. And he tells us that when we pray, we are actually giving data to the head to make those determinations. What should we do next? So what an act of humility. Christ came, the maker of the universe, came first inside a human body. That was pretty humbling in itself. Philippians 2 says, then it became a slave, and then it became a crucified servant. What an amazing humiliation. But even more than that, he receded and said, okay, you are my body now. God's reputation, my reputation rests with you. And I'm going to take kind of a backseat role here. You are the ones, you are the censors on earth to tell me what needs done, what needs doing. And then I will, through my spirit, make sure the rest of the body attends to that. It's an amazing act of humiliation, really, that God took on.
Now, we also cannot live without blood. It is truly our life source. What can we learn about this in a spiritual sense?
Dr. Brand's reflections on blood really transformed my view and understanding of communion. Almost every denomination does celebrate it. Some call it a Eucharist or a Mass or Lord's Supper. And we're all remembering Christ's death. But actually what we're also remembering is we're taking in Christ's life, much like a transfusion. In fact, Jesus used the analogy of grapevines. And he said that if you're disconnected from the vine, those grapes are just going to shrivel up. They're not going to have any life. It's important to keep that fluid flowing to connect you to the vine. And when I go to communion now, I do reflect on Jesus' death, the sacrifice that he made, but I also take it in as a sign of life, much like a blood transfusion. A blood transfusion can actually take a person who is on the verge of death and bring them back to life. And sometimes I feel like that at the end of a week, and I need that transfusion. I need that spiritual jolt, that connection with the rest of the vine.
Spiritual health is even more important than physical health, but God does want us to take care of our own bodies, his holy temple as well. Talk about the importance of that.
Absolutely. One reason I moved to Colorado is because it's such a healthy state. In fact, usually it's mentioned as the skinniest state of the 50 United States, and we have so many ways so much emphasis on health here. We've got the pure air. We've got so many ways to do exercise, both in winter and in summer, and obviously, God honors the human body because God took on God's own self, became a human being, took on a body of flesh just like ours. And Paul said, we should be athletes for God, really. In the same way that we exercise to keep our bodies healthy, the more we are fit, the more we can contribute to the body of Christ as a whole. I think of there people on the front lines, missionaries, people who are on relief crews, medical workers right now around the world, many of them Christians, many of them missionaries, even working on a coronavirus. They need health to help the others of us stay healthy, especially those who are ill. So we express our spiritual gifts always through our own bodies. That's all we've got to express. So keep the physical body healthy, and you can exercise your spiritual gifts better.
It's funny how you talk about being close to the mountains. Here in southwestern Alberta, we like to get our Rocky Mountain High as well. Philip Yancey, author of Fearfully and Wonderfully, The Marvel of Bearing God's Image. Thanks for joining me today from Colorado.
It was my pleasure, Hal.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.